unplug my controller.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Extra Mile for tonight, September the 5th, 2019, and we are doing a cold open this evening after the incident that we, by now, have all seen that happened at the Belgium Grand Prix. And this goes without hyperbole saying this is probably one of the worst open wheel incidents I have ever seen. On the second lap of the feature race of the Formula 2 Belgian Grand Prix, Anthoine Hubert spun at Radillon while trying to dodge Jean Alesi's car. He ended up getting into the barrier, into the tire barrier. The impact from the barrier tossed him back into the runoff area where Juan Manuel Carrera was unable to avoid his stationary car at the last moment. Carrera T-boned Hubert's vehicle at a high rate of knots and ripped the car of Anthoine Hubert completely in half. The race was red flagged and then canceled as the drivers were taken to the hospital, and unfortunately 22-year-old Anthoine Hubert succumbed from his injuries about an hour later. This was an incident that sent shockwaves through the F1 paddock. This is the first single-seater driver in either F1, F2, or F3 to pass away since Jules Bianchi passed away a few years ago. And this also sent shockwaves through the sport due to how many of the F1 drivers had relationships with Anthoine Hubert. Charles Leclerc was good friends with him. Current Toro Rosso driver Alexander Albon actually lived with Hubert for a few years. They were great friends. He was completely broken up about what happened in that incident. And as I welcome in Michael Ward for the first time tonight, Michael, it was a stark reminder on Saturday just how dangerous this sport really is.
It's funny. I was talking to Caitlin on the show before, and I was talking about there was a discussion about how dangerous Pocono was. I think you were there for that show, actually.
Yeah.
But we were talking about how dangerous Pocono is, and I said that it's a dangerous sport, but these guys, they know what they signed up for and they love doing it. And, you know, when you have something like that happen, it's shocking, but it's not an escape from the reality of things. Like it will happen, and it can happen. And if it can happen, it will happen. So it's a stark reminder of how dangerous motorsport is, and I'm sad that you know it's dangerous, but you don't want to see it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to see it happen, but it did, and not everyone, but I feel like a lot is gonna change in the sport because it's a death, and it's a death that it happened really unexpectedly. You know, it was just another Saturday morning F2 race in Spa. You're thinking, okay, this is gonna be a good race, and then somebody dies on lap 2. So it's a shock, and you know, rest in peace to Hubert, and he could have been the next F1 world champion if things were different, but.
Yes, he was going to be the heir apparent to the Renault F1 seat in a couple of years. He actually won 2 races in what was his rookie season in Formula 2. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but before that, as is customary after incidents like this, we're going to go ahead and have a moment of silence for Anthoine Hubert. Thank you. And as we get into the program, having to start on one of the most somberest of notes, when one of these accidents happens, the number one question is, how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? And Michael, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure what can really be done for an incident like this, just because when you're talking about a single-seater, it doesn't have, the steel cage of protection that we see a GT3 or NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series vehicle have. Those cars are more production-based. It's basically you're strapped in a steel cage. You take a hit like that, it's going to hurt, but you're going to be okay. A single-seater is built to do one thing, and it's to go very fast, and it is a very narrow, very nimble machine. But there's only so much you can do for the side pods or on the side of this vehicle, especially where Hubert was struck. And I know they will, there's people smarter than I that will figure this out, but from first glance, it's going to take some doing before we figure out just really what can be done after such a shock incident.
There's only so much that you can do, and if you do too much to the car, it loses its speed, and it loses a lot to what makes a Formula One car fast. And there are people smarter than both of us that can figure this out, and to that I leave them the challenge. But there's a lot that's to be required to make F1 cars safe. We thought making the Halo would be safe. It has made it tremendously safe, I will admit that, but making an F1 car entirely safe, and open wheel cars in general entirely safe, is a very tall order.
Well, it's never going to happen. We will never have a 100% safe motorsport. We're going way too fast, pulling too many G's for it ever to be 100% safe.
Right.
And to be honest, I think that's one of the things that draws us all to motorsport, where it's still that sport where the danger level, it's one of the few sports where the danger level is real and you can see it playing out. Because these cars are moving at 200 miles per hour. At that speed, there are very few incidents that can be categorized as small. And we go there for the danger. We want to see these guys on the razor's edge. And every time they're on the razor's edge, sometimes you're going to fall on the other side of it. Crashes are a part of the sport. They're spectacular. We cringe. We ooh and ah when it happens. 9 times out of 10, these guys walk away. Half the time they get out and want to fight each other. But then there's that 0.5% of time that it's just like what happened on Saturday, where we get that abrupt wake-up call that this is dangerous. And these are people taking their lives in their hands. And then, fortunately, we got another wake-up call at Spa on Saturday. You could just feel it as the drivers, the F1 drivers, had just finished qualifying at this point, and they're watching the race, and they look up and watch the start of the F2 race while they're doing interviews. To a man, they saw the incident, said they hoped that whoever was in the incident was okay, and just abruptly cut the interview. Because at that point, you just don't want to talk racing when you just saw one of the worst incidents. And those guys, they race since they're 5 years old. They know when an accident looks bad, and that was bad.
And that was horrible.
So we will leave that subject for now. I just want to say again, just want to send our condolences out to the family of Anthoine Hubert. Art, who was the Formula 2 team that he ran for, announced they will not run a second car this weekend out of respect for Hubert. And also, Gene Alesi's car is still impounded at this point. That car is a part of the investigation by Belgian authorities in the incident. that took Anthoine Hubert's life, which is standard protocol in all of these incidents. This similar would take place here in the United States. So they will be running one car as where Gene will drive. His teammate will step out of his car for this weekend, and Gene will drive that one during the weekend. So that is how F2 is shaping up for Monza. They do have plans to commemorate Hubert as well, and the entire international Formula world will try to continue on and put on a show that has wowed and amazed us for many years, even with the dangers that these drivers face. So that will take us into Monza this weekend, where positively they did just set a new F2 record. Jordan King ran a 132.5 in practice for Formula 2. He is now the new record holder at Monza in the Formula 2 car. But before we get to Monza, we need to talk about the Belgian Grand Prix. And Michael, Ferrari finally put a weekend together. They were fast in practice. They were fast in qualifying. They actually played the strategy right. And Charles Leclerc wins the Belgian Grand Prix and finally wins his first ever Formula One World Championship race.
But does it matter at this point?
That is the number one question, and honestly, not really. If you look at the results, it was Leclerc, then Lewis Hamilton second, Valtteri Bottas third, Sebastian Vettel, who just did not have the race pace, finished fourth. And I said this last time I was on the show, Ferrari, they don't need first and seconds. They need Mercedes to have retirements if they want any chance at getting back into this, and I just don't see it happening. The Mercedes engine has been pretty much bulletproof over the past couple of years. The only time we really saw the issue was last year with the double retirement in Austria with a fuel pump issue. That never reared its ugly head again. And then you saw in Belgium, the other Mercedes-powered cars were having issues with the Mercedes factory team. They were fine. They did not have the straight line speed that Ferrari had. That finally showed up and paid some dividends, but it doesn't really matter at this point because Mercedes built up such a lead in the first half that they don't have to win a race at all in the second half to walk away with both championships at this point.
Yeah, they don't. They honestly, Ferrari can get first and second from now on, and I think that Mercedes, depending on where they finish, would still win the championship. Or Hamilton will still win the championship.
Well, as long as Mercedes finishes third and fourth,
yeah,
they would still win the Constructors' Championship at this point. In the Drivers' Championship, Hamilton's got about a two-race advantage over his teammate Valtteri Bottas. Then it's a four-race advantage back to Max Verstappen, and then on and on and on. They need Hamilton to fall out of races if they're going to have any chance of taking this down to Abu Dhabi. If he scores points at this juncture, he's still going to win the championship as long as he continues to finish in the top five like he has. So,
and let's face it, it's Lewis Hamilton. He's not going to let that happen.
Well, we're not going to have any more rain like Germany, are we? Like, unless we get another race like that, I don't see it happening. I really don't.
I really don't either.
And it's sad for us F1 fans because we're looking at it, we're like, yes, Ferrari's finally being a challenge to Mercedes. Mercedes actually has to fight for wins, and they have an insurmountable lead. So at this point, you even have to wonder, is Mercedes still pushing like they were in the first half? Or are they starting to just information gather for 2020 at this point?
If I was Toto at this point, I would just start information gathering for 2020.
Christian Malley has joined us in the chat. Good evening, Christian. Thank you for joining us here for the Extra Mile. And I'm kind of that way as well, where I would start using this as basically live fire exercises for 2020. Now, you don't want to go too far off to where you start putting in dangerous parts and you end up not finishing races, but this is one of those times where I would start playing around with a little bit and start shifting resources towards 2020 because 2019 is pretty much locked up.
Yeah, I would just, after Italy, I would just kind of cease development of the 2018 car.
Mm-hmm. Or 2019 car, rather. 2019
car. I would just cease development of the 2019 car and put most of the resources to the 2020 car.
Mm-hmm.
And then I maybe even not put all the resources into the 2020 car. I might just put some resources into the 2020 car and then focus on the 2021 car.
I would definitely at this point start the process of shifting over to 2020. Like, you probably don't go all the way this weekend, but I would slowly start shifting the resources over to that enterprise, because at this point, as long as you can finish second and third, you've still got the championships locked up. You just can't fall into the lower half of the points, then you may run into trouble. So, and it's kind of sad to say that, because even when I saw Ferrari won, I wasn't like, yeah, the season's turning. It's like, well, it's about time, fellas.
Yeah, that's how I felt. I was like, oh, finally.
Because, I mean, really, Michael, they were trying to sell us that they had the best car, and they got half the season. They were
trying to sell us that they had the best car for months, and we were like, where was it? Where?
I don't see it.
I don't see it. You guys are getting dusted every race.
Yeah.
Where is it? Where's your straight line speed advantage?
And we finally saw it. Finally
saw it.
Better late.
Mercedes is 200 points ahead of you.
Yeah,
Good luck.
Better late than never, fellas, but would have been much nicer if you'd done that earlier. But
still a Ferrari fan, though, but come on now.
Yeah. On the other side of things, Max Verstappen.
Oh, God.
What are you doing, mate?
What are you doing?
What
was that?
Lap 1, turn 1, dives to the inside of Raikkonen. Not going to make that move in 10 tenths. Like, okay, in F1 2020, you could pull that move off. Or F1 2019. I think it's 2019. I have it on my computer. I can literally just tell you what the actual title is.
You can pull that move off, but maybe not without the realistic damage mod. But you can definitely pull that move off. But in real life, you can't do that.
Yeah, in F1 2019, that move works. I've done it several times. That does not work in real life situations.
Especially against Kimi Räikkönen. He will block you.
Yeah, he is the Ryan Newman, except for he actually won a championship, of Formula One in that regard. And he ends up damaging the car, ends up finishing last, basically. Does not score a point. That pretty much ends Max Verstappen as a fringe championship contender, I think. Like, that is done. Unless he starts winning out and Hamilton just stops showing up. He's done. And it's kind of sad because we thought the old Verstappen had mellowed a little bit, and a little bit of past Max Verstappen overdriving it on restarts, or starts, excuse me, reared its ugly head and cost him a good points finish.
Yeah, and also, I think it's time that his home fans must be getting a little tired of him doing stuff at the Belgian Grand Prix, because every year that he comes to Belgium, he does something to get himself out of the race.
it would be nice for him to actually finish a race there, and Christian Malley just said Max will never change, and he probably won't, and I don't want him to change because it makes it awesome. He makes F1 fun.
If Verstappen would change, he wouldn't be as interesting to watch or to like hear about.
No, he wouldn't. He makes F1 fun to watch, but unfortunately, it has its downsides, and in this one, it cost him a points finish, to be honest. So we'll see what happens. McLaren. Engine woes, yet again, hitting this team as Sergio Perez loses power before the start of the race. Where have we heard that one before?
Wait, you said Sergio Perez?
Oh, not Perez. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was about to say, when did he go to McLaren? Hold up. Did we miss something summer silly season? Hold up.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking F1 2019. Those wild driver transfers. Anyway, so Lando Norris ends up losing power before the end of the race. Literally on the last lap, loses power. He's done. That's sad. Start of the race. Getting ready to start the Belgian Grand Prix. Guess who loses power? Carlos Sainz. Sainz completes one lap before having to park up with an engine failure. Look, the Honda excuse is not there this time. Michael, I think at this point we can all agree whatever McLaren is trying to do in the engine department, it is not working.
It isn't. And the fact that they have actually a good car, but a bad straight line speed is just, it's disappointing because I feel like they can compete for podiums, but maybe not wins, but definitely podiums.
They should be getting high points finishes at this point.
Well, they are fourth in the constructors. They took that mantle from Renault, who's having... Let's not talk about them. But
Renault is not having a good season, by the way.
Yeah, they're not, and they should be, but they're not. They're fourth in the constructors. They have a decent car. It's just they can't get power out of it for some reason. And like Daryl said, the Honda excuse is out. Matter of fact, Honda's doing better than them.
Yeah, Honda moved over to Red Bull, and all of a sudden that engine looks like it's a serious threat to help Red Bull be world championship contenders next year. And Mercedes switches over to Renault, and they're having similar issues to what they were having with Honda. At this point, it wasn't Honda at this point. I know they feel vindicated at this point. Right now, Renault's struggling as a whole. You just got to figure out what's going on with them. And poor Daniel Ricciardo went over to Renault watching Max Verstappen win races while Ricciardo finished. Where did he finish on during the race? He finishes outside the points in 14th, a lap down. That's got to be burning him up. It's just...
Yeah, the sad thing about Ricciardo is that I felt like he's putting like the long term into this, thinking, okay, it's bad at first, but it'll get better. And it's hard to watch him finish outside the points because this guy's a race winner. You know what he can do.
Yeah, but at this point, at this point, he's in a stage of his career where he cannot wait for a team to grow and get better. He's got to start winning races and winning championships now. The shelf life of an F1 driver is not long, and Ricciardo is starting to get up there F1 wise. So he's got to start winning races and championships now. And it's sad to say, he's 30 years old, but that is over the hill in F1 driver age.
Yep, he needs to get it together, and I thought moving to Renault originally was a good choice because when the 2021 regulations set up, apparently it was going to favor factory teams, and I was like, okay, Renault finally might have some backing.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't happened yet. It's kind of annoying.
Yeah. I just don't know what Renault's going to do at this point. And the sad part is, at some point, the brass at the Renault car company is going to say, look, we've tried this experiment. We're not winning anything. It's time to pull the plug. And we're going to lose a manufacturer in Formula One if they cannot get this figured out. Because the engine situation is only getting worse for that team. It's not getting better, if we're going to be honest with each other.
Yeah, and if you look at it, they've lost customer teams.
Yeah. So hopefully that will improve itself. Because I want to see Daniel Ricciardo be a champion, but I just don't feel like it's going to happen. So you've been sitting here listening to really what's become a guy's night here at the Extra Mile this evening. This is actually a throwback to when I first started the show and brought Michael in early into that first season, and it was just you and I really for a long stretch of that time before we met Matt and Max and all the great people that have been on this show over the years. The ladies they're taking their little turn of getting the night off as Caitlin is enjoying the football game that's on right now between the Bears and the Green Bay Packers. And Lolita Camello's out actually either taking in or doing some racing in Grand Rapids. I'm not sure what she meant in our group chat, but she's in Grand Rapids right now and racing is involved. So I really do hope they're having fun, and I promise y'all, all four of us will be together next week. I promise y'all, we will all be together, the four of us, next week as we start the run to the championships here in Formula One, NASCAR, and IndyCar. So before we leave, we're going to go over again the podium for actually go through the points finishers of the Belgian Grand Prix. First through third, of course, Leclerc, Hamilton, and Bottas. Sebastian Vettel was fourth. Alexander Albon rounded out the top five. Sergio Perez, Daniel Kvyat, Nico Hulkenberg were positioned 6 through 8. Pierre Gasly and Lance Stroll round out your points finishers. And so we go to the standings. In the driver's standings, Lewis Hamilton leads by 65. That's pretty much a done deal at this point. And Mercedes leads by over 200 points on Ferrari. That is pretty much a done deal. The battle for fifth in the championship is currently led by Toro Rosso Honda with 51, with Renault at 43, Racing Point BWT Mercedes 40, Alfa Romeo 32, Haas 26, and Williams sitting there with 1 point. Has not been a season to remember for Williams.
Yeah, with 1 point, you can do it.
So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into IndyCar, the Portland Grand Prix, and a couple of teammates got into it and ended up knocking out a third car in the process. We'll talk about that on the other side of this break. This is the Extra Mile on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Two Wheels Wednesday is the place to come for all your motorcycle sports news every Wednesday on IE Sports Radio with myself, Matt White. All the latest news, rumours, race reviews and previews from World and British Superbikes and the big one, MotoGP. Two Wheels Wednesday, every Wednesday on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sport.
Hey USRN fans, do you have a product or company you're trying to promote? Look no further. USRN is teaming up with small local businesses trying to establish themselves via online promotion. Let us know if you're interested. Email us at usrnradio@gmail.com to learn more.
What up, all you boxing fans? This is Vince Wright, the sports governor, and me and Gilbert Batista are the host of Ringside on IE Sports Radio. Make sure you keep it tuned to IE Sports Radio, Spreaker.com for the latest edition of Ringside. All the boxing news you need right here. Keep it tuned, Spreaker.com, IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And we're back here on the Extra Mile on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. It's Daryl and Michael here on this episode. As I said during the break, or before we went to break, Caitlin and Lita have the night off this evening. They'll be back next weekend. We're going to get into IndyCar. The Grand Prix of Portland was on Sunday. That is one of the classic kart tracks returning to the IndyCar schedule. Still love that track. But Michael, it's been 2 years and 2 races, and we still can't get through lap 1 without an incident.
Yep.
Another big wreck at the start of the IndyCar race. And again, affecting the championship leader, this time it was Joseph Newgarden, manages to dodge their way out of trouble. I'm pretty sure at this point that's just gonna become a thing you have to do to win the championship. You have to be the championship leader. You have to start mid-pack at Portland, and you have to get through the incident to win the championship at this point. Because you just know at this point there's going to be lap 1 shenanigans at this speedway.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And it's funny because I'm watching the wreck now, and it just looked like the guy just locked up and he just couldn't get it down.
Because everybody's trying to be late on the brakes to try and get some extra spots here in the, in the opening stages of the races, as you do, especially on a road course, and it just ends up running into trouble more often than not. But it was a lot of fun to see them try and get through there. During the race, we had Colton Herta actually reappear as a leader. He led for a little bit before getting passed by Scott Dixon, and you'd think that Dixon's just going to dominate this race, which he was. And then he lost power. A battery issue knocked him out of the lead. Honda? You know what? I think it actually is a Honda. I'm on the points page. I can actually tell you. Yeah, it was a Honda, ironically.
Oh, God, that does not help.
No, it does not. And we had 2 power failures because Santino Ferrucci ended up losing power near the end of the race. It's been a while since we've seen battery issues in any motorsport, really. But for Scott Dixon, it's just like you're running for a championship, and it's like anything that can go wrong will. He had a radiator issue a couple weeks ago. Then the battery issue here. He went from looking like a sure lock to steal this championship to, Michael, he's about a championship afterthought at this point.
Yeah, just unlucky. Really unlucky.
Actually, I can actually do the calculation. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was actually just saying that. So you go ahead and expand while I do this real quick. I'm gonna do some math.
And it's funny because if you look at it, he's been really consistent throughout the season. Managed to claw his way out back into championship contention, and then he just gets all these issues out of nowhere. It's just it's frustrating if you're a fan of him, because, and it's even more frustrating if you are Scott Dixon, because you claw your way back into contention and now you're having all these issues.
If you're Scott Dixon, you're just sitting there thinking, I'm about to snatch another one from these young boys, and then the racing gods say, about that, no. So we got the Great American Duel back again, but at this point, with how the race ended, and we'll talk about that near the end of this segment, it's really Newgarden's to lose, and at this point, Dixon is 89 out. 50 out was about the cutoff to where you say, even with double points, you pretty much are on Snowball's chance at that point. So Dixon pretty much has to go for broke and hope the guys in front of him run into issues. And it's kind of sad because it looked like Dixon was going to be right in the mix, to be honest.
Yeah, it did look like he was going to be in the mix, but just when things were looking perfect, it just goes wrong.
Speaking of things going wrong, I don't know if you saw this, but during the mid portion of the race, Ryan Hunter-Reay and Alexander Rossi are racing, and I think it was, I'm trying to remember it, so I want to make sure I get this right. Hunter-Reay throws the mother of all blocks on his teammate, which block seems to be a theme of this show, and I'll explain that when we get to the NASCAR segment. He throws a block on his teammate going into turn one, outbrakes himself, runs into Jack Harvey, takes Harvey out the race, takes himself out as well. Rossi gets the point, or gets both those positions. I want to start with Hunter-Reay. Michael, what was he thinking in that moment?
Part of me thinks maybe he just went in a little too deep and he just couldn't keep it together. But as I watch it even more, he did throw a mean block.
The block is that
he did not need to throw, but he did.
The block is what gets me, because, okay, the worst case scenario is you and Rossi make contact, y'all go into the wall, Rossi's championship is over, and you look like the biggest buffoon in motorsport. The best case scenario is you hold up Rossi unnecessarily, you can't get past Jack Harvey, and Harvey just scoots away. The other bad scenario is what ends up happening. Ryan Hunter-Reay gets knocked out the way, and Jack Harvey ends up getting spun around, and then some people are trying to talk, did Hunter-Reay knock Jack Harvey out the way intentionally? It's like, look, if Hunter-Reay was going to try and free that spot up for Alexander Rossi, there are a lot simpler and a lot less expensive ways of doing it than what he did. I mean, let's be honest. Wrecking Harvey helps no one. Like, we can stop with all the wild conspiracy theories late in the season, but they won't, because that's what fans like to do. And, we have double points next week, so that'll be fun.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be really fun.
Yeah. And the championship contenders, where they finished after Will Power ends up picking up the win. Felix Rosenqvist, who looked like he was on his way for victory, got pipped by Will Power near the end. He finishes second. Rosenqvist does. Power first, Rossi third. Colton Herta finishes fourth after a great day. It was a great day for a couple of rookies in the IndyCar series. Joseph Newgarden, your championship leader, is fifth. Simon Pagenaud is seventh. Scott Dixon ends up doesn't really rally back. He salvages a 16th place finish. So you look at the points, it's over a 40-point advantage for Newgarden back to Rossi. Michael, I know it's double points, but is this thing done and dusted?
It might be. It depends on what happens during the race next week or this weekend.
And of course,
if it all depends on if he wrecks or not.
And of course,
or
going into one of these weekends, it's always most pressure is on the championship leader. But even more so that in a couple of weeks, we're going to the Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey back at Laguna Seca, now WeatherTech Raceway. So another classic circuit for open wheel racing in America back on the schedule. Cannot wait for that race in a couple of weeks. That track is going to test everyone, as we haven't really that open wheel cars haven't been back to that track as far as kart/IndyCar in quite some time since the merger. So for a lot of these drivers, it'll be their first time there. For some others, it'll be their first time in a while. So it'll take a little bit to get acclimated to the circuit. So that throws in another little bit of randomness that can happen in the championship finale. But for Joseph Newgarden, if he can just play it safe and have another top 5, he's got his second championship.
Oh yeah, if he all he has to do is just play it safe, and then it's done and dusted.
And that'll be great for Newgarden as he is starting to build up his legend here in the IndyCar series. A lot of people have been saying you need that young American driver to help captivate the audience. Newgarden has the personality, he has the talent, and a second championship will be well on his way to cementing himself as another one of the, or it'll be another check on the box on his way to becoming one of the newest American greats in IndyCar. I'll say it like that.
All right.
So let's go over the top 3 from the GP of Portland. That was last week. As soon as I get the website to cooperate for me. There's box score. Top 3 were Will Power, as I said, Felix Rosenqvist, Alexander Rossi, Colton Herta, Joseph Newgarden, Spencer Pigot, 4th through 6th. Simon Pagenaud, Matthias Laced, and Sebastian Bourdais, 7th through 9th. And Charlie Kimball, Max Chilton, and Tony Kanaan round out the top 12. The points standings in IndyCar looks like this. Joseph Newgarden on 593 points. Alexander Rossi on 552. Simon Pagenaud on 551. Scott Dixon on 508. Those are the 4 drivers still alive in the points championship, and it will all be decided in 16 days at the Firestone Monterey, or at the Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey, which will be September 22nd. Green flags at 3:15. You can see the race starting at 2:30 p.m. on NBC and listen to on the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio Network. We'll be right back for our final segment of the night. We'll be getting into NASCAR, and one driver said something that I thought was extremely rich. You'll find out on the other side of this break here on the Extra Mile on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, IE Sports Radio proudly brings to you its Intergender Tag Team Champions of the World. Yes, I am Martin Sandoval. My co-host is Felicia, and we are the hosts of The Gorilla Position, live Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. We bring to you all the latest in news and rumors and opinions and perspectives on the world of professional wrestling. We bring you guys the latest in WWE, Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and including independent wrestling such as Pro Wrestling Guerrilla and here VIP Wrestling live from Texas. Yes, it is the Gorilla Position with myself, Martin Sandoval, and my co-host Felicia, live on Spreaker.com and on iTunes.
Attention, all sports fans! If you're someone who wakes up each morning with lists of sporting events to go along with your to-do list for the day, then you just might be a diehard. The world of sports is as vast as the ocean is deep, including the major leagues, the minor leagues, the college, and everything in between. This is me, your boy Larry B of IE Sports Radio, welcoming you to join me every Monday evening at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on The Defining Moment, a show that focuses on what really matters in the sports world, sports themselves, and nothing outside of them. Once again, tune in for The Defining Moment with me, your boy Larry B, every Monday evening at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on IE Sports Radio, right here on Spreaker.com. We'll see you there.
From the home plate to the nets, the end zone to the finish line, here nothing is off limits and no sport is safe. Not what it seems, with your host Caitlin Seam, bringing you sports like you've never heard before. Catch me Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, right here on IE Sports Radio. The only question is, are you ready?
It is a defensive struggle right now in the opening game of the NFL season as the Bears are currently leading the Green Bay Packers 3-0. The Bears are up in that game. Just giving you guys an update on the one game going on in the NFL right now as we are back here in the Extra Mile on iSports Radio, your feed for all that is sports. And that's a good way to tell you, good way to segue into the fact that 3 and Out is back for another season here on IE Sports Radio. Your weekly updates of everything football, college, and the pros. Keep up to date here on IE Sports Radio with all the football news. Listening to 3 and Out. That can be found anywhere where podcasts can be heard. And we are back here in the Extra Mile on IE Sports Radio. Your direct feed for all that is sports, and it's time to talk NASCAR, the Southern 500, and Michael, that Jones boy did good. He got himself his first win of 2019, and by doing so ends up locking himself into the playoffs, and by doing that, he also beat his teammate, Kyle Busch. He actually fended him off to the last few laps of that event. Kyle Busch ended up getting into the wall, surrendering second to Kyle Larson. It was a good day for Eric Jones, and that is a driver, Michael, who everyone else had him out of that ride by the time this season ended, except for, of course, Joe Gibbs and Eric Jones himself.
All right. He definitely held his ground against Kyle Busch. You have to have a certain amount of talent to manage to do that.
And the funny thing about Eric Jones is that he's been pushing for that win the last few races. He has been absolutely on fire. Couldn't get that win. Finally got it. He has got to be feeling good about himself going into the playoffs and trying to possibly make some noise here and be a surprise entrant into the Final Four.
Oh yeah, definitely, and I hope he continues that form that he's been showing lately.
I hope he does run well as well, and it's good to silence some of the critics. A lot of people that had him out of that ride already had Christopher Bell in to that ride. By the way, a lot of people had Christopher Bell taking over the 20 and Eric Jones going away, but Jones, in the eyes of the JGR brass, had done enough to secure a contract for the foreseeable future. So Eric Jones will be back with that team going forward. And it's got to feel good for him going into these last few races to know that he's not racing for his job. He can just go out and focus on just trying to bring a championship to himself and his team.
Yep, like I said, if he keeps performing like how he's performing, he'll definitely be a surprise factor for it.
So the top 5 in that race were Eric Jones, Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, and Brad Keselowski, your top 5. In the Southern 500, in the points race behind them, the race for 16th, it is a tie between Daniel Suarez and Ryan Newman, the two of which got into it on the racetrack at Darlington. Suarez took some air off the spoiler of Ryan Newman's car and ended up turning Newman around, and Newman got out the car talking about what goes around comes around. Newman complaining about someone racing him too hard, and I just sit there and say, sir, didn't you just influence the end of a race 2 weeks ago in Bristol when you got into it with Matt DiBenedetto? And one of the main talking points about you the past few years is that you are always in the way. Whether you want to call him being the hardest driver to pass or not, that's a good way of saying he's always in somebody else's way and going way too slow. This Ryan Newman is saying that.
Rocket Man Ryan Newman?
Yeah, sir. I think you need to look in the mirror a little bit before you complain about somebody racing you too hard, because you are running people in positions way higher than you way too hard during times that you do not need to be racing them. He needs to figure that out. And you get angry that is rich, that you're mad that somebody was blocking you. Because you've been blocking a lot of people. And a lot of people should be lining up next to your car at the end of the race. Michael, what do you think?
I mean, he's been the type of person to race people too hard. And he literally, like you said, ruined a race for Matt DiBenedetto, which he could have won. So for you to be saying that you're racing someone too hard, it's kind of hypocritical, Mr. Newman.
He altered
Not only that, right? This is NASCAR.
Yeah.
People who race each other hard all the time.
Also, we're coming into the playoffs. The playoffs. It's only going to get harder from here. So, if you're that upset that people are running you hard, maybe you don't need to be in the playoffs, sir. And that's all I got to say about that, because everybody at this point, I think, knows I have my problems with Ryan Newman and the way he races people.
You and those people he races against.
Yeah. So let's move on to more pressing matters. Michael, a playoff streak of epic proportions is about to end. Because since 2004, there's only been one driver that has made every single iteration of the playoffs. That would be Jimmy Johnson.
Good old JJ.
That is coming to an end, or possibly coming to an end, at the conclusion of events on the 18th. All right, not on the 18th, excuse me. At the conclusion of events this Sunday in Indianapolis, because going into the race, Jimmy Johnson is 18 points behind. At this point, he is going to have a big day, and Suarez and Newman are going to have to end up wrecking, or not wrecking out, but having bad days for Johnson to keep this streak alive. Michael, do you think the streak ends on Sunday, or does it continue?
Part of me wants to say it's over because you got a lot of people who are hungry to get into the playoffs, and the way Johnson has been driving, it's not looking like it. Maybe he'll get in. Maybe by some miracle he'll get in, but I think it's highly unlikely at this point.
I think I've been on record multiple times as saying I don't think Jimmy Johnson is going to make the playoffs. And at this point, sadly, it looks like that's about to come true. I think at the end of Sunday, Jimmy Johnson misses the playoffs. And that's going to be sad, because this is a guy that at one point was Mr. Playoffs. He won 5 straight championships through 3 different iterations of the playoffs, all of which were designed to try and stop him. They did not work. And now we're sitting here actually preparing to enter a Jimmy Johnson less playoff reality. I don't think I'm prepared for this, Michael. I'm really not.
I don't think a lot of people are prepared for this, but it might just happen this weekend because, like I said, the way everyone else has been performing and the way he's been performing, it's looking like it's a possibility.
And unfortunately, I think that would actually be really the real death knell of Jimmy Johnson's career if he falls out of the playoffs, because at this point, it's definitely not a matter of if, but when with Jimmy Johnson, because he's not getting any younger. His daughters definitely aren't getting any younger. Eventually, he's going to want to go spend time with them, especially now that one of them is starting to race. So we could be seeing Jimmy Johnson calling time in his career in just a few short years, unfortunately. But as we talk about the playoffs, one driver has officially locked in the number 1 seed. That driver is Kyle Busch. With his second place finish in Darlington, Kyle Busch is officially the regular season champion. He will get the 15 bonus points at the end of the day on Sunday, and Kyle Busch will lead us into the playoffs. He has had 10 stage wins, 4 race wins, 13 top 5s, and 21 top 10s on the season. Michael, he's got to be a favorite going into the championship.
Oh yeah, he's definitely a favorite, but let's be honest, do we really care about the regular season championship?
No. If it didn't give 15 points, we would not care. But it is what it is. It exists, and He gets a kind of a cool trophy from it, but we all know the big trophy comes at the end of the year.
Right.
So, Michael, before we sign out, we have to do some picks here in Nearest the Win. And before we do, I'm going to run down the scoreboard. Caitlin's got 30. She's got a 5-point advantage over Larry with 25. Matt Owens, a USRN, has 22 points. I have 21. Seth East, 14. Lolita, 14. Michael, you have 13. Matt White has 12. Couch Crew Chief, 10. Pete Gruffalo, 6. And Pierre Moss, sitting on just 1 point. Not been a good year for Pierre Moss making picks. So we got Formula One and the Brickyard this weekend. As far as Formula One, I'm going to roll the dice, ironically, with Lewis Hamilton. I think they overcome that speed advantage. I don't think Ferrari's ready to put two races together just yet, so I'm going to take Lewis Hamilton this week.
I am going to take Leclerc.
Mm-hmm. In NASCAR, who am I going to take? I think I'm going to take last year's winner, Brad Keselowski. Who do you got?
I'm going to... Wait, what track are we going to?
Indy.
I'm going to take Harvick.
So those are our picks for Nearest the Win. Remember, if you want to get those in, just hashtag Nearest the Win and who you think is going to win this weekend. But that will be the checkered flag on this episode of The Extra Mile. Next week, the gang will be all back together. Remember, check out Caitlin's show at 5, Not What It Seems. Check out Lita's writing, at gbgirl.com. Check out mine at wbgrnetwork.com. And remember to keep in touch with us at IE Sports Radio, on our social media pages on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And join the website, get hooked up with the community, chat with us, learn more about us, see show schedules and more at iesportsradio.com. And remember, if you missed any episode of our podcast, you can listen to them on the Spreaker Show Reel, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, the iSports Radio website, YouTube, and other places where podcasts can be heard. So, for Michael, I'm Daryl. This has been The Extra Mile, and we will see you in the next green flag. Good night, everybody.